Telling people I'm a film major is like saying, I can't wait to put the fries in the bag after I graduate. Hi everyone, my name is Katie and you're listening to KT, where I talk about my passion project on my passion project. That doesn't make sense. Oh well, I tried. I was recently asked why I'm here, as in why I'm a film major, which at first offended me, but it made me realize I could make an episode out of it, and not a manic one either. I'm probably not crazy, I promise. So here I am, telling you why I'm a film major. One of my favorite professors always said, "Don't tell me you're a comedian, make me laugh." And I've taken that to heart ever since. So I won't start off with telling you why I'm here. Instead, I'll tell you how I got here, which is most of the story. My very first exposure to the media industry was when I was maybe 4 years old. Somewhere there's a picture of me at an interactive science museum in front of a meteorologist screen, and I'm pointing to different parts on the screen pretending a storm was coming. And ever since, my grandma thinks I'm going to be a weather girl when I grow up. When I was in 4th grade, I transferred to a school I had been interested in since I knew about magnet school lotteries. Where I'm from, a magnet school is a school that specializes in something, and has opportunities that other schools didn't. One school specialized in math and science, and had cool experiments that the other schools didn't have. Another school specialized in Spanish, and for half the day the students spoke English, and the other half of the day the students only spoke Spanish. My dad really wanted me to go to that one, but I could only apply to so many schools. Anyway, I won the lottery just before 4th grade to go to the magnet school that had a TV studio. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. At the time, I had thought about what I wanted to do when I grew up. As a kid, they don't tell you about many occupations. There's doctors, teachers, lawyers. One of my friends in 4th grade told me I'm so smart that I should be a doctor, and that they're paid well. So of course I wanted to be a doctor at the time, before having the 4th grade realization that if I'm a doctor, I'd have to deal with blood and guts, which I didn't want to deal with. So I kept thinking. Anyways, did you guys have specials in elementary school? Like, one day was art, another day was music, another day was gym, and another day was library? Well, one day at this elementary school was TV studio. So every other week, since it interchanged with the library, I'd get to go to the TV studio with half the class. And let me tell you, that's where the stars aligned. I was in awe the first time I stepped into the TV studio. We'd practice and record our school's announcements, and I got to be the anchor. So somewhere on YouTube there's 10-year-old me reading from the teleprompter, happy to be there. That's when I decided that I wanted to be in front of the camera. I wanted to be a news anchor. Through the next 2 years, I was introduced to cameras and the process of stop motion and claymation, as well as filming commercials and radio shows. In 5th grade, I was bullied for my appearance, specifically my hair, which was cut into a mullet that year, and that's when I decided I didn't want to be in front of the camera anymore. And the insecurity stuck with me. I only want to be in front of the camera on my own terms, like for my YouTube channel, but it's not all bad. Because of this, I got introduced to the switcher for our announcements, and I realized that I enjoyed it a lot more anyway. In middle school, I went to the only magnet middle school in my city, which focused on the arts, from band to visual art to media. If you know me personally, you know that's my jam right there, and not just for the media part. I'm an instrumentalist, which I have an episode for that in the making. Stay tuned. Anyways, one of my acquaintances from some of the elementary schools I went to invited me to try out with her for the morning announcements. Now, when most of you envision the morning announcements, you picture your principal talking over the intercom. Well, at my middle school, we did live announcements over YouTube that teachers played in their classrooms every morning. So, I went into the classroom with her in 6th grade and tried out for the announcements together. For every month from then to the end of middle school, we got a week dedicated to us as anchors to talk about club meetings, Spirit Week, and most importantly, the lunch menu of the day, which was really funny. Once a week we had pizza, but the menu didn't just say pizza. Once a week I had to say, "And for lunch, we're having Big Daddy's pepperoni pizza." Did your school do that, or was it just my district being weird? Anyways, I was a school celebrity. I don't mean to brag. Especially since it was middle school. I definitely didn't peak in middle school. That would be embarrassing. By the time I would get to my 3rd or 4th period, people would ask me in the hallways what was for lunch. And what's funnier is that even though I read the menu over the announcements to start my day, I didn't remember by the time I went to lunch, so it was always a surprise to me. In 7th and 8th grade, I took a class called Media Arts, and it was so fun. My teacher was named Mr. Schaefer. who was a short, sturdy man who served in the military before becoming a teacher. In 6th grade, everyone was scared of him because they said he was really strict. Well, I got a hold of the rumor and turned it on its head. He wasn't scary, you just had to get to know him first. He was strict, but he was a really cool guy. And if you were lucky enough to get to know him, he'd let you use his fake neon squirt guns as props in your videos. And his wigs. He had a matted blonde wig in the back of the classroom with the rest of his props, which today would probably be a health violation, but that's none of my business. If it helps, my former middle school is now a STEM school instead of an arts school. Back to class. We made commercials, skits, magazine spreads. I even made a mini documentary about the Muppets. And my favorite, short films. I still reminisce about the short films I made in middle school, where our only limits were that we couldn't film in the bathroom. Let me tell you about one of my short films. It was called Bomb Thought. It was about a band nerd practicing in a band practice room that leaves their metronome on and forgets about it and leaves. The ticking of the metronome makes the principal go crazy, mistaking the ticking for a bomb, which puts the school on lockdown. He calls the bomb squad, a group of 3 idiots that search the school and come up empty. Then the band director confronts the principal and the band nerd, and the film ends with the principal figuring out how to punish the band nerd, while the band director says he'll give her extra credit for practicing. That was such a fun thing to film, let me tell you. I wish you could see it. But at the same time, it was middle school, and I don't need to be judged more than I already judged myself. Just take my word for it that it was really funny and cool and epic for a short film made by 8th graders. Another short film I made was called Teacher, We Have a Situation, when I was in 7th grade. It was about a school shooting. I know, pretty realistic, and a pretty dark topic too. Anyways, we convinced Mr. Schaefer to let us use his neon toy gun so we could actually go through with it. The film was about a school shooter who happens to be a student walking around the school with a hit list, and he finally gets caught by the police, which is a pretty entertaining scene. We got my math teacher to play the cop, and he tackled our school shooter actor. The whole thing is pretty funny, because the shooter is a tiny kid, so there was no way we could pretend it was a grown man. So we put pictures in his locker of people on his hit list, and each time he killed someone, he would X out the picture and draw devil horns or a mustache on his victim. Another short film that was fun to work on. I also made a commercial. It was for Holy Water, and the slogan was, "Holy Water, tastes like heaven." I had the assistant band director, who had long brown hair, play Jesus Christ himself. It was a running joke at my middle school that he looked like Jesus, so I went a step further and casted him. 2 boys in my class played angels, and 1 wore the infamous blonde wig. The commercial started with heavy metal and a black and white filter, filling a bottle with something demon-related. I remember when I brought the assistant band director in for filming that day, everyone in the classroom watched everything go down. It was amazing. I green screened it so the background was like the stairs to heaven or something. There were naked little cherubs all over and a blue sky with clouds. It was awesome. Once again, just take my word for it. For my final project in 8th grade, everyone had to make their own project. It could be any kind of film, magazine spread, whatever we wanted. So I made a mockumentary about my math teacher, Mr. Meyer, called Teacher of the Year. It was about 3 minutes of Mr. Meyer goofing off, which is what he did all the time anyway. Just picture an episode of The Office. That class was the highlight of my middle school years. One of my classmates from that class is also pursuing film studies or something related to that, and he's doing great things at Ball State. It's so cool to see the impact that class had on other people. It definitely had an impact on me. A month before I graduated from high school, I ran into Mr. Schaefer, and he recognized me right away. He had retired, so he spent most of his time volunteering. He asked me if I was still interested in media, and I was so happy to tell him about my acceptance into a media school and my scholarship, and what I planned on doing. It was so good to see him again. His class inspired me to have the passion for media, and I wouldn't have that dream without him. So thank you, Mr. Schaefer. I may have spelled your name wrong in my script, but I know you'd forgive me. Moving on to high school. I actually wrote a memoir about my experience having Mr. Bailey, my high school intro to communications and digital media teacher, so I think I'll read some of that. It's 1, less script writing for me, and 2, it communicates what I want to say about him anyway. Here goes. The first time I met Mr. Bailey was at 10 in the morning on my first day of high school as a 14-year-old who wasn't used to being back in school or public. I walked into the stuffy classroom without a word and sat near the far corner of the classroom away from the door. I was short of breath from the combination of wearing a mask and climbing 3 flights of stairs. However, I was thankful for the mask. It made me feel less vulnerable. Initially, I didn't talk to him until a few weeks in when I had to be vulnerable. We were put in groups and assigned to various locations to interview teachers, and my group was to interview the librarian, who would later retire that year. My group consisted of an anorexic, fashionable blonde, and a guy who was always doing something weird on his computer. The interview was terrible. No tripod, no formality, and no structure. After the interview, I suggested that we take some stock video, and the computer guy handed me the camcorder, so I took a couple of shots. The next day, Mr. Bailey told the entire class that the interview with the librarian was the worst, and so bad that he had to do it over himself. My stomach was in knots. I felt completely responsible. After class, I went to Mr. Bailey's desk and almost in tears said, I wanted to apologize. My group was the one in the library. Owning up to my mistakes is something I was never good at doing, and because of Mr. Bailey, I've learned to do so. However, what surprised me was the way he responded. I should be the one apologizing. My instructions weren't clear enough. He then informed me that the stock video was good enough to use for the final project, and I admitted that was my footage. Mr. Bailey took me by surprise. I wasn't used to an adult apologizing to me. The adults I knew didn't own up to their mistakes. I just want to feel validated. That was the last line of a poem I wrote that I used to come out to Mr. Bailey. I emailed him on an April morning, asking him to read what I was going to later submit to a school-wide poetry magazine, and received a response within a few hours. That's cool. By the time I got to his classroom for my last period of the day, I was sweating. That's cool? Did he read what I wrote? Did he understand the vulnerability of what I had sent? The next 50 minutes went by slowly. The bell finally rang, and I didn't move from my desk until it was just the two of us. It was time for confrontation, a word I despised. Did you read my poems? I asked. He told me he had. All of them? He frantically clicked around on his computer, looking for the document I sent. I'm so sorry. I thought there was only a first page. The silence was anxiety-inducing. The building was already quiet, and the silence was almost eerie. I look everywhere except at him. Mr. Bailey finished reading, and out of all the words he said, I'll always remember 6 of them. Katie Baker, I'm proud of you. That was something my mother would never say to me in the years I had known her before she abandoned me. In the middle of my sophomore year, 25 of us were cramped into the small attempt of a studio. Our school had a studio on the first floor, but the principal didn't like Mr. Bailey and didn't let him teach class there. Like my communications class, people were forced into my class, and many of them had behavioral issues. That day, we were to choose broadcasting roles to practice doing the school's daily recording of the announcements. I had chosen to be the producer, my favorite role. However, no one else had stepped up to do anything. This was usual. But today, Mr. Bailey had enough of it. If you don't participate, you'll all fail the fucking class. His voice boomed. The silence was loud. A little more composed, but equally angry, he said, I'll be back in a minute. He left the room, and I took it into my hands to ensure there were people in each role. Alright guys, we need 2 actors. Who's going to be the actors? When Mr. Bailey returned, we had a perfect run-through. That experience taught me how to take charge in situations, and it made me even more confident to spark change in the second half of my high school career. And that's an excerpt of that memoir. Mr. Bailey is an amazing teacher, and I'm so grateful to have had the honor of being taught by him. He's the reason I continued pursuing media as a career, and the reason I decided to go to college. Thank you, Mr. Bailey. I hope you're still proud of me. For the second half of my high school years, I had a different teacher. Mr. Bailey had enough of my high school, and frankly, so did I. But the difference was that he was able to get a different teaching position. I was not able to switch schools. So here came Mr. T, that's what I'll call him, with no teaching degree or experience. He had a media degree from Ball State, which my grandma's ex-husband always said was a C school. My junior year, I took Intro to Broadcasting, which was an easy A. Kind of. I knew how to do things, so I didn't have to learn them like everyone else. However, the majority of his class did not. It was the kind of class that all the rejects were put in. You know what I mean. After putting the kids with bad behavior in gym and art, you have to find another place for them. So, a lot of them were in Mr. T's introduction to broadcasting during 6th period. At first, I didn't like Mr. T. He never disciplined anyone and let people goof off. I wanted to be the producer and only the producer, but he made me be not only the producer, but the floor director, and the teacher who had to yell at everyone to try to get anything accomplished in the studio. Not to mention, this is a real studio. As I mentioned before, the principal didn't like Mr. Bailey, so he wouldn't let him teach his classes in the studio, but Mr. T got the studio. It was draining, telling people how to behave. And I give teachers so much credit. We need good teachers that will handle kids. It was then that I swore off teaching for good. Then again, if a school needs me to teach media arts, I might consider it. It was my 2 favorite media teachers that made me fall in love with the idea of going into production as a career. And I think it would be amazing if I could be as inspiring as them to at least one student. It wasn't completely bad being in charge either. During my sophomore year until the end of my senior year, I was in charge of producing events in the auditorium. God, I sound like I'm writing my resume. What did that entail? I wore a headset connected to every person on camera during talent shows and dance fundraisers and told them when I'd switch to their camera. I'd start the live stream, switch cameras, and sit back and relax and watch the show. I also did some producing and camera work for basketball games. My favorite time was when I produced a student staff basketball game the day before spring break my senior year. I also had a lot of fun listening to Mr. Bailey commentate when I worked camera my sophomore year. Was he the commentator? No. Was he still going to trash talk? Hell yeah. One thing about him is that he always keeps it real. After junior year, I quit taking media classes at my high school. I knew I couldn't stand it anymore. So instead, I decided I was going to get an internship with a media company. How did that go? Well, let me tell you. I applied at countless newsrooms. No response. I tried just about everything. Then in the beginning of my senior year, Mr. T sent me an email which read, "I heard you're looking for an internship. Well, I'm in contact with so-and-so, and guess what? It's paid." I jumped on that right away and filled out all the paperwork. It was with the local college's sports broadcasting crew. I had never been much of a sports guy, if I'm being honest with you, but it didn't stop me from trying. So I got trained on the audio board and cameras. When I work audio, I get to talk to the color commentators and tell them about how much time they have when they're on commercial. When I'm on camera, I have to be focused on the game. I've worked a lot of women's basketball games, so now I'm fond of women's basketball, and I enjoy watching sports much more than I did before, and before I didn't at all. To this day, I still work for that broadcasting crew when I'm in my hometown, and it's so much fun. I love my job. It's my first job in the media industry, and I'm so glad I had such a great opportunity to see what a positive workplace environment looks like before stepping into the industry as a college graduate. So thank you, Mr. T, for setting me up. I appreciate it a lot. Thank you for the opportunity. Today I'm in college. I wrote the majority of the script when I was supposed to be doing assignments, and Grandma, if you're listening, no I didn't. I didn't think I'd get to go to such a great university with an established program that I love. I'm so grateful. Now I'm working my hardest to get my degree, and it's a lot of work, but I'm really enjoying my time here. Now that you know how I got here, this is why I'm here. I love to create. I hope that's obvious by now. I find joy in creating things that entertain people. Whenever I do something even as simple as make a collage on Pinterest, I like to send it to my friends, like they're my mom and I'm a 5-year-old saying, "Look what I made at school." I'm sure this is an effect of not having a mom, but I'll save that for another day. If I'm being official, my major is media, with a concentration in film, television, and digital productions. So when I'm asked by classmates, I'll say film and TV, but anyone else, it's just film. I don't go into all of it. I'm proud, but at the same time, it's a little embarrassing to tell people I won't have job security post-graduation, which, will anyone, for that matter? When I tell people I'm a film major, they look interested. They don't tell me I don't have a chance. Not one person I've talked to has asked me why I'm not studying something boring like finance or business instead. Sorry, business majors. Your major sounds lame as hell. I'm sure you'll all be laughing when I'm living in my parents' basement while you're making big bucks and living in a beach house during Christmas. But you know what? I won't be counting down the minutes when I'm at my job in the film industry. I'll be having fun not sitting in an office all day. And if that's what you want to do, that's good for you. But I don't want that lifestyle. I've recently got into making slideshow presentations. It sounds lame. Don't we have to make enough presentations for school? Well, they're not academic. For example, one of them is called my Spot a Cry Wrapped, which is literally what it sounds like. I tracked my crying habits for a year, and then made a slideshow on how I cried over men way too much. Which, content-wise, not fun, by the way. But building the presentation and having fun with my graphic design skills is enjoyable to me. Other presentations I've made include my Hear Me Out list, which is a list of men that, well, hear me out, and a slideshow of women that I admire, which I affectionately titled Spank Bank. So, what am I going to do with my degree? To give you the short answer, I don't know. Which, I'm aware, that's terrible. I'm going to school to not know what I'm going to do? Waste of money, waste of time, right? Well, let me give you the long answer, because that's what I love to do here on my podcast. I know what I like to do. I know what I can do. I love doing camera work. I love editing. I love working with lighting and sound. The reason I don't know what I want to do is because I want to do everything, and I can't. I want to do all the jobs. I love working in news studios, film sets, and sports arenas. I don't have a favorite, so I hope that answers the question. It'll help me when I apply for jobs, since I have a wide range of interests, but yeah, I don't have a specific occupation I'm working towards. I'm sure another question you may have is, why did I start my podcast? Well, I've been thinking about one in an unserious way for about a year and a half before actually releasing the first episode. I used to joke around, saying that I have a lot to say about whatever the topic was, and that I should start a podcast. Well, in 2024, I became serious about it. My goal was to release my first episode in November, but life got in the way, so I pushed it back to the end of December, which also got pushed back. So I finally released my first episode on New Year's Day this year around 3 in the morning. I work on my podcast a lot more than you might think. I'm constantly thinking about it, for one. I'm always figuring out what script to write next, and the different holiday shows, and if my next topic will get me canceled. Just kidding on that last part. I like to think of myself as a writer. I love to write. I used to write different things all the time, but time has definitely been an obstacle since everything seems to occupy it. For a second, I considered going into journalism, but I love the hands-on experience that film gives me, so writing has always been on the side. It surprised some of you that I write the entirety of my scripts, as opposed to jotting down some key points and talking about them. And I guess a good question is, why do I do it? Well, I've established that I love to write, and I enjoy the process of writing about things I'm passionate about. It's productive in a way. I get to write, and what I write gets used as a script. I have done a completely unscripted episode before, and I'll give you some time to guess which one that was. It took me forever to record, mostly because I'd forget mid-sentence what I was going to say next, and it took me even longer to edit. I cut over half of what I recorded, and it was a really hard thing for me to talk about at some points, and I knew writing about it would bring me a lot of pain. So I brought my raw emotion to that episode, and I think that's what it needed. If you haven't guessed, it was my Valentine's Day episode. I'm not saying that's the only episode that's genuine. I need to make sure I say everything I want to say, which is why I do write most of my scripts completely. It's just that I knew I couldn't handle the pain of writing and then talking about that. So I sat down and just started talking to myself for an hour while I was just by myself. When I write an episode, I'm passionate about it. So far, I haven't done research on anything, and I speak from the heart. My podcast is very opinionated. When I tell people I have a podcast, they ask what it's about, and I tell them it's about anything I can talk about for at least 10 minutes, which usually gets the job done. Script writing takes me from an hour and a half to maybe 2 hours per episode, depending on the topic. If it's a heavy topic, I try to work on it at night, when I don't have another class to go to feeling down, Or I'll find a stopping point and tell myself, I'll work on it later, which in reality, later is a very long time in the future because I don't want to go through it again. I think a lot about what I'm going to post on my Instagram, which is KT Podcast if you're not following it yet. I like to plan posts far in advance, and sometimes I take hours out of my day just to work on posts and stories. I treat my podcast Instagram like a public spam account. Remember spam accounts? I feel like they aren't as popular anymore. Since I tell you guys to follow for behind-the-scenes content, I like to post behind-the-scenes content. You don't really know much about me based on the episodes I've posted so far, at least in the aspect of my hobbies or favorite color or attributes like that. You know my values and personality flaws. So I like to think that if you follow my Instagram, you're getting to know who I am beyond the podcast, which I think is sort of sweet. I spend a lot of time talking about my podcast to my friends, and don't ask them if they're annoyed. If you do, don't tell me. I love saying something and then following with, find out on my next podcast episode. They laugh, so maybe I'm not annoying them yet. I didn't realize it, but I like having an audience. However, having social anxiety doesn't make me think so. So being able to talk about something online where I don't have to stand in front of a lot of people and have something memorized is such a blessing. I take pride in this podcast. I really do. It's the passion project I didn't realize I had. I really didn't think I would go through with it, but once I started putting the work in, I realized I needed to go all in or else I wouldn't enjoy it. That includes my posts, my editing, my music intros and outros. If you didn't know, I created the music for the intro and outro. That isn't just some royalty-free MP3 sound I found on the internet. Of course, having a podcast has its downsides. Aside from all the technical work that I put into it, including listening to my own voice for hours to get episodes edited, when I meet someone new, or even a potential suitor if you will, the first thing they will do is listen to my podcast. Which yes, thank you for the streams. I'm very appreciative, by the way. But now you know I'm crazy. And on a first date, that doesn't look very good. You have a lot of ammo on me. When I barely know a thing about you other than your dog is in all of your pictures on social media. I dread the day that I go on a first date with someone who can diagnose me based on my podcast. Although, it might not be a bad thing. Maybe they can fix me. So, potential suitors, begging you to think I'm not crazy would be crazy of me. But let's pretend knowing my embarrassing stories gives me charm, not a straitjacket in a rubber room. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this episode of KT. If you're interested in getting updates and behind-the-scenes content, go ahead and follow KT Podcast on Instagram. That's KAETEA Podcast. I also take episode suggestions. You can leave them in my DMs or feel free to comment on any of my posts. Don't expect a super long episode for a while, by the way. I only have so much time. And with that, I'm Katie, and this is KT. Thanks for listening, and I hope you tune in to the next one.